if we choose to move slower than we could, we run out of time. So each and every moment, we should move as quickly as we can. Whatever style that we're going to use for whatever exercise we've been prescribed, we want to use the one that's quickest. That leaves time at the end of the set to recover a little bit more. That leaves time at the end of the set to do more repetitions. So we move as quickly as we can each and every moment. When we move quickly, eventually it becomes tough. Can we change how we're doing it in order to keep going and make it easier?
Hello and welcome. This is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential, where we get together with top experts in their field who have simple, profound advice to help you and I live better lives, to be able to be more fit to serve the people around us and answer that question, the question that nags within all of us: how good can I be and how great can I make it for people around me? In this episode, we get to talk with Dr. Corey Duvall about what he does for people, about how he acts as a Sherpa and guide for so many others, including myself. And we get to share with you the conversation that he has online, on Instagram with the Stay Active method, as well as what he practices both in person and remote with CrossFit AVL. So I'm excited for you to join us, for you to leave this conversation as a better person, more equipped and empowered to do what you want to do, feeling the way you want to feel, and helping other people do the same. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm here today with Corey Duvall, fitness practitioner extraordinaire, coach of myself and so many others, and just people, essentially just helping people optimize and get to their best self and find out what are those simple principles that are going to allow them to have a successful journey toward feeling their best and living their best. And so excited to be sitting here with you today and just listening and just opening this conversation up to so many others and allowing them to be part of a conversation that we've had for about the last year now, maybe a little bit more. And I've just found that what you do and the way that you think is simple, it's profound, and it allows people like me to get the excuses out of the way and just find out what's actually going on, to be able to listen, to be able to interpret. And I want other people to have a chance to really hear from you and hear it from you, how they can find their fitness, how they can find their best shape, their best form, and their best feeling. So I guess for me, that's a great place to start. What would you say are 4 ideas or principles that you have found to help people unlock that potential, to help people find their best and to live their best?
Brian, I appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah.
It's been good working with you and your family over the last year. And if I were to start with the top principle, I would say it is the idea of inspiration.
Okay.
Inspiration is both the creative energy that allows us to move forward and find our own potential. And it is also the physiological principle of taking a breath in. And when we exercise and challenge our bodies in a respectful way, there are changes to our physiology that open the rib cage, open the chest, and in a subconscious way allow us to hold and maintain that inspiration for a longer period of time.
Okay.
And when we are aware that allowing ourselves that opportunity, it carries over to that creative expression of our potential.
So many questions I want to ask. I'm just trying to shut up. I'm just trying to not dig in, because this could be a 5-hour long time together in conversation without a doubt. But I love the simplicity, right? That inspiration, that opening of our chest, opening of our mind. That's great. What would you say is the second one?
Second one is the concept of influence versus control. We are born with a genetic code that has limitations on it. we are in an environment that will hinder, alter, and change our expression of ourselves. And so we cannot control our outcome of our own fitness, but we do have influence. So when I show up to the gym and I'm going to work on strength that day, my level of effort is something that I have influence over. But the actual number on the bar that I get to that day, I don't have control over that. And so I show up, I exert my influence in the direction that I want to go, and then I accept all of those other factors.
Love that. Love that. That's the exact opposite approach. It's like I've got control over the number, right? But I only have influence on whether I show up. That's how I felt like I've lived this journey, and that's what's allowed you to have so much impact. Love that. That's great. It's great.
So you bring up that point of showing up and trying to have control. That's definitely my third factor, which is that flow is what we're looking for. Each of us in our existence, we are looking for what is that phase of life that gets us to unlock our potential, that gets us to have the most influence on ourselves and those around us, that allow us to access that inspiration with minimal level of difficulty and minimal level of effort so that we can do more and more. And discipline and surrender overlap and allow us that flow. And so discipline is the idea of showing up and initiating our effort. And so we've got to set ourselves a plan and set ourselves a schedule and a time and a location where we're going to show up and we're going to get started.
Yep.
And then as long as we've selected that direction, we're going to let whatever happens happen. And surrender is the acceptance of all of those outside influences. What is my genetic limitation? What is the limitation of the environment that's around me? And so here I am showing up, initiating the direction, and then letting whatever happens, happens. And the more I do that on a regular basis, day in, day out, week in, week out, year over year, I exert that influence and I find that flow. And that's what gets me where I need to go.
I love this because this runs parallel to a principle that I just heard, and it was from Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules.
Yeah.
And he talks about the importance, like how I'm set up in my mind is I want to win the game, right? I want to win the game.
Yes.
But he talks about winning the game as being able to play it the most.
Yes.
Not play it the best, but actually being able to play it the most. How often do you get to play the game? Because that's truly winning it.
Yeah.
And that's where I've screwed up in my fitness journey on the way a number of times, is because I tried to win the game of the day, but lost the game of the week, or win the game of the week and lost the game of the season, right? And then just find myself in these injury cycles that don't allow me to have longevity, but just really carry with them and kind of a time urgency. How much intensity can I put in before the next injury sets in? And then this yo-yo system back and forth. And that's what I feel like you really helped me get away from. Yeah. It's like those typical seasons, because they're programmed in my mind. My body is still ready to be injured, but it just won't get there, right? It won't get there because I'm not feeding it that type of input, right? I'm not doing to it what I always did, which actually allowed for a real reason. And now it's just like, okay, now I just have to deal with myself.
Yeah.
I am because of that principle, and I love that. How many times can you play the game?
Yeah.
Right? That's awesome.
That's really good. So I've set up an intuitive model as kind of what you're starting to get to, is the intuitive model that I've set turns people back in on their own sensations and their own feelings. Mm-hmm. And so you have the discipline to show up, and you have the discipline to start that process. And the surrender is about going in and saying, what does my body feel today? And based on those feelings, I'm going to select a style of activity and exercise that I'm going to take on.
Yeah.
And so injuries carry with them symptoms. And if we listen to those symptoms, we realize what our body needs, And based on what our body needs, we execute that style of exercise. So when we bump up against the symptoms of an injury, we get redirected to how we feel, and we redirect our own body away from that injury direction and more towards a long-term development direction.
This is something that you've had, a place where you've had a huge impact on me, because I thought I was listening before and responding, but it's kind of like just waiting for your turn to talk. Right. And that's how I would say that rapport has gone between me and me, right? Between where I thought I was listening, but I didn't know how to interpret. And you have a very simple framework that says, when it's like this is what your body's saying, and this is how to respond. When it's like this, and for me, totally out of left field. Totally out of left field. I mean, I could not have been doing things in the more opposite way, and therefore getting why I got the results. The story makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the story makes sense for the results I was getting, because I was like, they were speaking, my body was speaking in one language, I was listening in another and replying in a third, right? And so I would love for you to break down that framework that you have for what the body is saying, how we're listening, and how we're responding.
So sometimes we say, I want to be strong. I feel weak today, therefore I want to be strong. I feel tired today, therefore I want to be more enduring. I feel stiff, therefore I want to be flexible. And that want is what leads us in the wrong direction. Our body is saying, hey, you've expressed some strength. Therefore, you're going to have symptoms of that previous expression. And that symptom is going to hold us back. So we're going to feel a little weak after we've exerted ourselves towards strength. So if we say, I want strength, you're going to do strength again and again and again and again. If you have expressed a little bit of stamina effort, you're going to feel tired. And if you feel tired and say, hey, I want to do more stamina, I want to execute at whatever level you've perceived, you're going to try to hold yourself to that standard. So if you're going to go out for a run, you might say, I want to be able to hold a 6-minute mile. If you're tired, you need to do 6-minute miles for 20 seconds, walk for 20 seconds, 6-minute mile for 20 seconds, walk for 20 seconds, based on how your body is feeling. But you're going to say, oh, I got to do the whole mile at 6-minute pace. And so you're going to want to do that, and that's going to bury you.
Yeah.
And so that intuitive model separates flexibility and stamina as the base of our fitness, and strength is the peak of our fitness. And then we show up, we check in with ourselves. The symptoms tell us whether we need stamina that day, whether we need flexibility that day, or whether we're ready for strength that day.
Yeah. And just as in anything else, like what it is isn't necessarily what it does. So when I thought about stamina, right, I thought about stamina in a very certain way. And what you prescribed to me as far as stamina work is very different. Like stamina, I'm thinking like running that 6-minute mile, but it's actually quite different than that. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's quite different from what I thought around stamina work. Same thing with flexibility work. Thinking flexibility, I'm going to do yoga. I'm just going to chill. It's going to be like that. And then sometimes I am pouring sweat in the middle of my flexibility exercises. And there's different things that you have used to cue me, such as head postures, breathing patterns during those things. And I think just even I remember being on the bike one day and I was doing stamina work. So I was going in hard. My eyes were down, my head was down. You're like, that's not it. It's like, I would love for you to share that too, if you don't mind. Just the different postures, the different patterns that you recognize are most beneficial in each one of those.
Totally. Let's start with that head posture for the stamina work. I define a difference between stamina and endurance. And stamina is about prolonged activity, and endurance is enduring discomfort for a period of time. And if we try to do a high volume of suffering type activity, if we try to take on a lot of discomfort for a really long period of time, that leads us to burnout. We can survive war, maybe. We can survive famine, maybe. Those are the evolutionary things that we needed to endure. We do not need to do that as part of our exercise. If that happens, we'll be ready for it. It's in our genetic code, but we don't need to take that on. What we do need to do is be able to sustain efforts for longer periods of time. And so when people go into stamina work, we want to have a mental framework that allows us to sustain and go for longer periods of time. So I talk to people about keeping their head up with their eyes beyond the horizon so that they can see where they're headed. Not so focused on the immediate moment of what they're getting done, but the long journey of where we're headed. Now that helps psychologically, but it also helps physiologically, because as our head goes down and as our eyes go down, we create this cyclical focus that increases our stress hormone. And so if I have a 40-minute stamina piece, I'm going to have some stress hormone that's produced from my body for the effort. But if I double that and increase that with my eyes and head posture, I create a lot more stress hormone than I needed to. That's going to prolong my recovery, and that's going to have me burn out faster. So I say, hey, let's keep the head up, eyes beyond the horizon. Let's see where we're headed.
I love that, because you need to know zero about stress hormone. Mm-hmm. You need to know zero about the physiological or psychological effects of this. Mm-hmm. It's just like, if my head's down, bad. Heads up, good.
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
Inside of stamina, mm-hmm. and it's different. And one thing I remember you saying is that stamina work is for others, and that strength work was for you. And so if the work is for others, it's eyes up. And it's like, wow, because I get into that zone where it's like grit and grind, and it's like all these roided up guys who have zero recovery time telling you how to work out in the gym and how to do that. And I was like, I'm not trying to look like that or do that. I'm just trying to get to a place where I'm injury proof or as close to that as I can be. I feel great, no prolonged pain. And whenever my son wants to do something, I'm able to be there, whether it's down on the ground, whether it's getting up or anything in between. And so I love the simplicity that when we enact these things with our body actually sends all those signals and takes care of it without us having to have, a doctorate like you and
exactly.
and be an expert in the field. So
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. As far as that, learning how to listen and interpret, one of the things that fell outside of that realm for me and just surprised me and kind of was hard to establish at first. And I've heard it from other people, but the way that you brought it to me was incredible. Whenever I've done squats before, especially any work with my hips, I've dealt with soreness. And that soreness took me from, okay, I'm working out, so I'm more capable, to being less capable over the next few days. One of the things you told me to do to help with recovery was salt water.
Mm-hmm.
You got to talk about salt water and the importance as you see it.
Uh-huh. So it's probably easiest to get there if we understand the current cultural climate around salt. Evolutionarily, we were hunters, we were gatherers, we became farmers, we were physically active. And that transitioned into office work. That transitioned away from lots of physical activity to way less physical activity. And part of moving less means that our blood vessels shrink. And when our blood vessels shrink, our blood pressure goes up. And the damage that occurs on the inside of those blood vessels goes up. Then our body creates a clot to deal with the damage inside the blood vessels. That leads to stroke, heart disease, and heart attack. And so physicians looked at, hey, we've got these people that are getting this damage to the inside of their blood vessels and leading to disease and death. How do we help them?
Yeah.
And they said the one direction they went was, if they have less blood in their smaller blood vessels, they will end up not creating as much damage because there's less pressure in there.
Wow.
If you have less salt in your diet, you will have less volume of blood. If your volume of blood is lower, you're less likely to die of heart attack and stroke.
Yep.
Now, if you take somebody who was at that risk and say to them, you need to exercise and be on a low salt diet, you turn them into a more active individual, but you take away their blood volume.
Wow.
And so what ends up happening is we're sacrificing blood and fluid in our bodies. We get low blood pressure symptoms like dizziness and brain fog. We can also get excessive soreness because the water that's necessary to wash the tissue damage away from our exercise, we don't have anymore because we're low on salt. So the first thing that I do when people start getting into exercise or are experiencing symptoms like excessive soreness is I help them get the discipline to measure their water intake on a regular basis. Once they're on a consistent amount of water intake, we then check in on urine color. Urine color should be a steady yellow. If it trends towards clear, what that means is the water that we're drinking is peeing out before it's washing our tissues. And so if we need to wash our tissues to wash that soreness away, we add salt to the water. When we add salt to the water, it gets to where the tissue damage is. It washes the tissue damage away. Now our urine is a steady yellow color. And so that helps unwrap all of the societal changes around salt and water intake.
I think that this is so important because this is an area where everything that I've known to be true is actually fairly opposite. And it was like, I understand the reasoning, especially dealing with more sedentary lifestyles. You're looking for death prevention, not optimized life.
Exactly.
Right. And so when we're having these conversations, and a lot of times people are looking to doctors for this information, they're getting death prevention advice rather than optimized life advice, right?
Exactly.
And so instead of being told what to do actively, it's what to do passively so you can have more years, right? Rather than have more quality.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of urine color, it's like, oh, if it's clear, I'm hydrated. And so I'd be like, yeah, I'm drinking more than enough water.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out it's passing right through me and diminished kidney function isn't helping anything and all that stuff. Again, not stuff you need to know to just drink more water and put some salt in there.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And
simple.
It was simple and getting used to the taste and everything was hard. But you know what wasn't hard? Getting used to not being sore.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I'm working out and I can use the muscle and I can use the mobility. I can bring that into my life in a very positive and constructive way. And now my workouts aren't taking away from my quality of life. They're actually creating it. They become the foundation for it. So that's so key for people to understand as well because a lot of this, one of the reasons we're having this conversation is because I feel like I know for myself, my own journey with getting this information has been picking it from all these different places. And it's almost like when you look at your life and your makeup and you're in this mind, body, soul element, right? You're in this, you've got all this advice out there, whether it's authors or thinkers in their space, philosophers, CrossFit athletes, whether it's bodybuilders, cooks, whatever it is, from the kitchen to the bedroom, you have all this advice. And if we are to separate those, it's kind of like 3 jigsaw puzzles, but they've all been thrown in one box on YouTube or on all these other different content platforms. They've been shaken up. And then I get on YouTube and I'm like, oh, this is the secret. I just have to do what Tom Platz does, where he works his legs to excessive failure. And that's why he has thighs that are as big as my waistline. Wait a second. He died when he was in his early 60s. Hold on for a minute. Oh, I need to sleep less in order to work more. Hustle and grind culture. Oh, damn it. That's causing an emotional soreness that I can't get over, an emotional sensitivity that I can't get over. And so I felt like I was putting 3 different puzzles together and finding all these odd corner pieces. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, is to start to straighten this out, because while it's right in one context, it's actually wholly wrong in another context. And to have some simple frameworks to figure this out is everything.
Yeah.
And that for me, I really want to tie this together, because your journey to get to this point of being simple, having these simple, profound principles in your space, and not only being able to get the results for yourself, but get the results in other people.
Yeah.
I know that hasn't been a short journey. So talk to us a little bit about your journey there, and kind of some of the things that some of your own processes, some of your own breakthroughs as you went along.
Yeah. So currently a chiropractic physician who started CrossFit while I was in chiropractic college. From that point until now has been about 15 years. Chiropractic has a root philosophy that the power that created our body can heal our body, and that the symptoms that we experience are signs that are guiding us in the right direction, as opposed to something that's wrong that needs to be eliminated. And so going through that CrossFit journey with the awareness that, hey, what I'm experiencing is guiding me and doesn't need to be turned off, has been kind of a big part of that process. Now, my history, I started playing basketball when I was 6. When I turned 14, the basketball coach helped us get into the weight room, and we did Arnold style upper body hypertrophy exercise for our arms, and then we played basketball for our legs. So already starting to kind of separate the body apart, one thing for one, something else for the other part. I had a water sport accident when I was around that same age, around 12 to 14 years old. I never got x-rays, but I do have strong symptoms of what's known as a pars fracture in my spine, which is a small part in the back, my low back has potentially broken. I tore ligament and cartilage in my left knee and had 3 knee operations from the time I was 15 through 16. I herniated a disc in my neck doing bodybuilding style exercise. Playing soccer, I separated both of my clavicles from the shoulder blade here. Playing in the ocean after a hurricane and doing some body surfing, I dislocated my shoulder, getting slammed into the ground, and subsequently have some grinding symptoms that are associated with rotator cuff tear and cartilage damage in there. And throughout my life have had bouts of asthma and pneumonia, exercise related usually. And so I've definitely pushed the limits of what my body was capable of for the first 30 years of my life. And as I got into CrossFit, but still doing chiropractic college and getting into practice, I was really involved in studying the biomechanics of the body. There was the idea that you have your cardio work, you have your bodybuilding work, and those things should be separate. And CrossFit said, hey, let's bring it together. And when we bring those two things together, we're more about just moving our body the way it was designed, as opposed to starting to compartmentalize. Yeah. And that instead of bodybuilding focusing on the arms and the legs and the torso and the back, let's think about lifting. Let's think about squatting. Let's think about pushing or pulling or carrying, running, jumping. Let's move our body in all of those ways, as opposed to starting to separate things out. And so I was really focused on the biomechanics early on, but I started to develop some of those asthma symptoms again and got myself into some walking pneumonia from overexertion because I wasn't paying attention to my energy. I was just focused on the mechanics. I was given advice to increase asthma medication right before my exercise, which was a lot of that energy shift. My body was saying, hey, sometimes you got to slow down. And I was turning off that mechanism in order to go harder for longer periods of time.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I spent a few years doing that. And right around 30 years old, I'd sorted out a lot of my mechanical stuff, lift, squat, push, pull, jump, run. I was feeling a lot better there, but it became very obvious that my energy was not going in that same direction. That the masking of those lung symptoms was leading me into way more intensity than what I needed to do. And so I decided I'm going to start to cut back on that asthma medication. I'm going to start to listen to those symptoms of my breathing, and I'm going to start to allow that to adjust my intensity over time. And I really started to become aware that ignoring those allowed this short-term increase in intensity, but impacted the long-term.
Yeah, that's so important, because when we go to certain people, we get certain advice, right? If we go to the doctor, we're going to get, a lot of the same injuries and a lot of the same issues, sports-induced asthma, herniated discs in the neck, things like that. And some of those things came from just wear and tear on the body. You're a perfect example. So am I. I feel like of rode hard and put away wet. It's like, it's not a say. Never have babied myself.
Nope.
But there have been times where I've really regretted how hard I've went and how little I've listened.
Yes.
In that deal. And so when I was coming to you, with recurring issues where, I had surgeons tell me I needed surgery, but was able to find other avenues to fix it temporarily, but kept experiencing this recurring injury.
Yes.
And now have all but eliminated that, right? And it sounds like, necessity being the mother of all invention, you had to use yourself as that project.
Exactly.
And really experiment on yourself. And that's where whenever different words mean different things. 5 years ago, CrossFit meant to be, that's a really great exercise. Or even 10 years ago, people thought that. But now CrossFit, be careful, right? And so when I tell people, I go to CrossFit AVL and I see Corey Duvall, and be careful with that. I'm like, this is the most careful I've ever been, like in being full of care, not being paranoid about injury, but actually full of care. And so. Yeah, I love that you've gotten to that place in your journey and learning how to be full of care.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Of that phrase, full of care, is part of careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see you in there doing the work with people. I see you demonstrating the work, all the videos, and just really working within the context of people's limitations, so they don't always have to work inside of that context.
Exactly.
And you talk about restraint, and this was one of the first things that got me. There's two principles that really got me. The first one was that effort can be push or it can be restraint.
Yep.
And the other one that got me was that, and I'm gonna have to try to remember it. Shoot. Effort can be push or restraint, and man, I cannot think of the other one right off the top of my head.
No problem.
But talk first about that. I'm sure it'll come to me.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how effort can be effort to hold back or effort to push forward.
Yeah. So I'll get to that in a little bit of a roundabout way. When I was in undergrad, I studied both biology and philosophy. And philosophy focused both on Eastern and Western directions. And the ancient Greeks had the idea of a 3-part system to our soul and spirit and body. And it was the idea of a chariot with 2 horses. And one horse was our appetite, the other horse was our emotion, and the third horse, 2 horses, appetite and emotion, and the chariot driver is our reason. And in order to drive that chariot most effectively, you need all 3 working in conjunction with each other, being guided with both intensity, and direction. So if we eliminate the horses altogether, we just don't get anything done. We don't go forward. If we eliminate one horse or the other horse, we'll eventually fatigue the one that's left because we're overusing that one. And if we have no guidance whatsoever, the horses run that chariot right off a cliff.
Yeah.
And so we got to have all three working in conjunction with each other. And so it's very important when you step in to choose an effort level that you're going to put yourself forth, to decide what your drive is for that. If we feel good, we have energy and emotion and we're like ready to rip, we got to really push on those days because strength requires intensity. If we're tired going into strength work, we're not going to be able to put forth the effort we really need to. So on those good days, that's when we push. But the important part about pushing is knowing where our edge is so that we can push the edge a little bit as opposed to driving ourselves all the way off a cliff. And so the effort is both in the restraint, like we're going to set our strength work up over a few sets where we're going to feel what is the edge of my ability today. I'm going to work to go progressively faster over a few sets. I'm going to work to get a few more reps over a few sets. So I'm going to do a set and then I'm going to say, okay, how did that feel? I'm going to do a little bit more in the next set. Okay, how did that feel? I'm going to do a little bit more in the next set. Okay, how did that feel? We're getting close here. When am I ready to push? And so you have to put the effort into the restraint early on because you feel good that day.
Oh, yeah.
You're like ready to go. It's important to hold back a little bit. Then once you know where that edge is, that's when you can put your full intensity into those final set or two.
That's great.
At the same token, when we do our stamina work, the majority of the effort is in that restraint.
You listed as comfort zone, which I've never seen on a fitness app ever.
Okay.
I've never. There hasn't been a single video I've watched where it said "work in your comfort zone." There was never anything once. I read this, I'm like, well, that must be a misspelling. There's got to be
Autocorrect error.
Yeah, obviously that meant like uncomfort zone or something. Yeah, that must have meant something else. So yeah, keep going.
So the idea of the comfort zone and the effort zone is that there are two levels that limits of our ability require effort and we just get incredibly uncomfortable. And then within that is our comfort zone. How much can we do and still be comfortable? And what is our absolute limit? Now, there's only a certain amount of discomfort that we can push through. And so if we're always doing uncomfortable work, our comfort zone will actually shrink.
Absolutely.
Because we are constantly uncomfortable and we are uncomfortable for a reason. Our body is saying we are working really inefficiently right now. It's going to take us a really long time to recover. So I'm going to make you aware that it's uncomfortable sooner and sooner and sooner. And so if we want to maximize our abilities, we've got to push through discomfort. But in order to push through discomfort, we also have to be able to be comfortable at greater and greater margins. So there are times where we work in a comfortable space and that comfort zone grows, which gives us the launching pad to put all of that effort to really go for it. And I'll give you an example. I would run 400 meter repeats.
Mm-hmm.
And I could never figure out why I would run so fast for the first one. And I was told, here's your 3-minute rest, go again.
Mm-hmm.
And I would run slower and I would do a 3-minute rest and I would run slower and I would do a 3-minute rest and I would run slower.
Yeah.
And I'd feel like such a failure across those sets. I was told, run this pace, recover this long, do that over and over.
Negative splits is the ideal, all of that. Yeah,
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I always took that negative splits as I wasn't pushing through enough discomfort in those later sets. So I would push through more and more and more.
Yeah.
Well, all of that was based on a heart rate test. What is your max heart rate? Should your heart rate get back to before you go again? Well, if you go deeper into that heart rate research, what you realize is that for people who have had asthma or other chronic diseases, their heart rate working zone needs to be lower. But that was like fine print at the bottom of the scientific article. That didn't get put forth. It's not what
The coach was yelling after he whistled.
not at all. Not at all. And so I was aware that it was just harder and harder. And I felt like, ooh, I'm just not pushing enough.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read that, I said, oh, I'm supposed to be 30 beats per minute lower through this work. So I'm going to check in on that. And what I realized was when I held back those extra, that was where I started to feel uncomfortable. And I was like, ooh, I feel a little uncomfortable, way lower than I should feel uncomfortable. And so what I'd been doing was feeling uncomfortable, pushing. When all of that work was supposed to be within that comfort zone, and mine was shorter, mine was smaller. And so instead of me prescribing to somebody, work at this BPM, put on this heart rate monitor, look at these numbers,
Absolutely.
check in with how you're feeling.
But listen, the gear to go to the gym nowadays, you have to like take off your sleep ring and put on your workout watch. You've got more technical data than any doctor did 15 years ago.
Definitely.
And it's all over you. And for me, it became a distraction from being able to listen and interpret. Exactly. It all became outside of myself.
Exactly.
Rather than putting me more into that conversation with my muscles, with myself, with how I was feeling, with exactly how I was expressing that with what I was doing.
Exactly.
And I think that's just so valuable and important because what's the next piece of tech that I need to tell me that I'm out of shape and not doing this right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that simple understanding of being able to take people away from this over technologized, or I'm sure there's a better word, working out or exercise, to this simple understanding of with prescription. So yeah.
So when we're doing stamina work or we're doing flexibility work, we want to be within or maybe at the edges of our comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And then when we're ready for strength work, we find where's the edge of the comfort zone. Now we're getting uncomfortable. Where are my absolute limits on those days? And that's how it feels internally. That's also how different body parts feel in relation to each other.
Yeah, that's and it's so valuable because it takes the pressure off of what's happening right now, and it puts it on, okay, what's the goal? Because when it comes, whether it was losing weight, whether it's gaining strength, whether it's being able to do more stamina, I've always had it on these timelines that didn't serve me and weren't realistic. Yeah. And so when you're coaching during these times, and I come into your gym and I'm like, I feel like my deadlift is just a little bit wrong. I feel like I'm doing this exercise wrong. Show me the right way.
Yep.
Show me, like, this is all I want from you. Mm-hmm. I'm paying this fee for coaching. I know your time and energy is worth it, but if you'll just give me the right way to do this, then I'll be able to get the right result.
Yep.
And you didn't. You said, I would say, what's the right way to do it? And you would say, quickest and easiest, fastest and easy. I forget which one you use now off the top of my head.
Yep.
But it was always the same. I'm like, but you don't understand. What I want to know is what my hand position, where my shoulders should be. Tell us about that mentality and why you give that instruction and how it's so important for all of us.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
When we start doing bodybuilding style exercise, we're trying to hit a specific curve of work and recovery for each muscle. And so if I'm working my arms, I want to have a 3-day recovery cycle. So every exercise I do within that 3 days needs to have as minimal strain on my arms as possible.
Okay.
When I'm working my legs, I want to have that 3-day cycle. And so every exercise I'm doing, I want to avoid my legs until I've recovered for that. That's bodybuilding. That's focus on parts as opposed to the whole body. If we're focused on moving the whole body is going to have an energy shift and flow over time.
Okay.
Now, when we make a transition into how our body moves as opposed to what our body looks like, coaching needs to change as well. Because a lot of those cues of what a movement looks like to keep you safe is based on, am I using my back to help my arms? That's a problem in bodybuilding. But if you had to carry this chair over here and you're trying to use your arms and not your back, that's just not going to work.
So wait a second. You're saying in my real life, if I'm not constantly doing bodybuilding poses and I actually need to carry shit,
Exactly.
it could be a problem.
Exactly.
That's what I found. I found myself getting to a place of sensitivity and almost this place of the fragility. Where I was like, yeah, it looks good and I put on more muscle, but it was a place of like, I put on more muscle in this very linear direction.
Yes.
And keep going.
That's very good.
Yeah.
So we want our exercise in the gym to make life a lot easier, which means we've got to have a smooth flow from how we use our body outside of the gym to how we use our body inside the gym. And so I started with that framework of keeping people safe in the gym depends on what it looks like to me as the coach. And if I got better and better at seeing what things looked like inside from my perspective, then I could tell somebody how they're going to stay safe.
Yeah.
Well, when you work with significant back injuries, when you work with significant people recovering from rotator cuff tears, recovering from knee operations, long-term multiple car accidents, all of a sudden, what it looks like to me is not what it feels like to them. I'm saying, hey, you need to have your back at this angle. You need to have your hands at this angle. You need to have your feet perfectly placed so that we're going to keep those knees safe. We got to hit this angle on this exercise in order to stay safe. And I just regularly would have people be like, but that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, how am I going to rationalize helping this person when I'm telling them that this is what's safe and they're saying, but it hurts me right now.
Yeah.
So I started juggling that, and a client was kind enough to give me a reference to Lamar Gant. Look him up, G-A-N-T. He was a power lifter. I think it was like the 80s or maybe the early 90s. He deadlifted 5 times his body weight. He weighed around 130 pounds and he picked up over 600 pounds.
Just like me. Tell him it's just like me.
5x body weight.
That's crazy.
World record. Unbelievable.
That's wild.
And you watch the guy lift, you're like, I can't believe he just did that.
Yeah.
Then they took an x-ray of his spine and he had a scoliosis that would take your breath away. You don't even need to know what x-rays look like. And you're like, it doesn't look right. It looked way off.
Yep.
And I realized that there isn't a single joint in that spine that's neutral. There isn't a single joint in that spine that is like in the safe position. When you really start to look at his musculature, you're like, yeah, he's super imbalanced. How is he not fragile? How is he able to train like that and build to a world record deadlift of 5 times his weight off the ground? So I went all the way back to training principles. I was like, we've got to build resilience in people. And it has nothing to do with what it looks like to me. It has everything to do with what they're focused on and what it feels like inside of them. So quickest and easiest is both philosophical and physiological. If we choose to move slower than we could, we run out of time. So each and every moment, we should move as quickly as we can. Whatever style that we're going to use for whatever exercise we've been prescribed, we want to use the one that's quickest. that leaves time at the end of the set to recover a little bit more. That leaves time at the end of the set to do more repetitions. So we move as quickly as we can each and every moment. When we move quickly, eventually it becomes tough. Can we change how we're doing it in order to keep going and make it easier? All of a sudden, as I'm grabbing a bar this way and doing a particular exercise, part of me gets tired. I switch a grip. Now it feels easier. I can keep going.
Yep.
Now I switch a grip. It feels easier. I can keep going. Now I start to incorporate a different movement of my torso. I can keep going. Still moving quickly, still getting the work done, finding all of those easy ways. Fragility is about doing the same thing over and over. And as soon as I switch, something breaks. But if I could do that particular exercise many different ways, I'm broadening that base.
And I think the philosophical element of this is so critical, because I didn't realize in the gym I was teaching myself, when it gets hard, I have to stop. When I have to change, I have to stop, right? I have to stop, because if I'm making these acclamations, if I'm changing things, then it's only moments before I have to quit, rather than realizing, no, my body is telling me exactly what to do. It's the best built-in coach I could have, and not to get thrown off by changes, but to understand that this is the survival of the fittest.
Yep.
Right? It's the most able to fit. Now we're here. What do we do now? Do we just stop? Right? Do we change without any belief, or do we just adjust? It's not a stopping moment. It's just an adjusting moment, right? And so the physiological, just like building into this idea of resilience, because resilience, no matter what part of our life, because things will change.
Yeah.
The way we feel will change. The way the people feel around us will change.
Yeah.
And so building in that resilience is everything. The first thing I want to do is like, is this okay? Right. And you're like, well, if your body said to do it, it's okay. Right. I love just that art of listening and just, because we've been, for me, it's the myth of the expert.
Yeah.
Like anytime there's any little change, I need to check in with the expert. And what you tell us is like, yeah, do check in with the expert. Make sure it feels good.
Check back in.
Yeah.
You're the expert.
Exactly.
I'm the Sherpa.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. And I think that leads me to the last question of, if, for me, I was asked this question. I just think it's such a profound question. And I love this. It's, if I could go back and instill one thing from the beginning of my journey, one thing back into me, or one thing into somebody else who was just beginning this journey, what would that be? And so I want to offer that same question to you. If you could, to somebody who's just beginning their fitness journey, they have all the noise. They're trying to figure out what the signal actually is. They're trying to eliminate all the noise. They have plenty of options of what to watch. They're being told 10 different things to do. What would you put in that person's heart and mind so it can move into their hands and feet and really allow them to have a better experience?
Sitting deep within them is both patience and persistence. And we want to always be in that place. So you're going to learn something, you've got to try it. And you've got to try it enough and be patient enough to see where it leads you. And it's going to lead you in a path that you're going to bump up against something uncomfortable. You're going to bump up against resistance. And when you do that, you've got to be persistent to keep going. And that persistence and that resistance will guide you further along that path. Sometimes we lose that patience and we bump up against the discomfort and we just sit and stop. Instead of there to there to there, and we continue on.
I love that, because I think as we're sitting at the beginning of a new year, right? And this is my pattern, is like, okay, I make resolutions until I hit up against that resistance, and the way the training falls out or the options fall out, and just understanding that level of patience and persistence. And my answer to that same question was that you can be here and it can feel like this. And I think in much of the same way, it mirrors yours, because I thought in order to be here, right, in order to be financially successful with my diet, successful with exercise, successful in relationships, I thought I would have to give up feeling like this, right? I would have to be a go along to get along, right? Happy wife, happy life, right? You got to give up in order to do that, rather than build actual authentic and whole relationships, right? And that this is one piece that I'm excited to continue to have a conversation, because we can talk about encountered difficulty versus initiated difficulty, which we've had some great conversations.
That's a good one.
There's so much to unpack in that, and I think that deserves a whole conversation by itself. But
Definitely.
just for people to know that they can be here and feel like this, that they can be in a place where they physically feel great, right? They physically feel great, but they don't have to give up. They don't have to give up all these. It doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be complex. That you can look great on the outside, that you can be proud of how you look on the outside, but it doesn't mean that you have to listen less. In fact, it means we just have to change the way we're listening.
Yeah.
And that's really profound. And I love that you offer this not only in person, which a lot of people who I know, as well as myself, we get the benefit of in person, but I know a lot of your students, a lot of the people who you guide through this process do so virtually. So what's the best way for people to find you, to connect with you, because they want to start their journey, or they're just thinking, it's time for me to think and feel different about my fitness and about the way I'm on this journey through life?
Yeah. Easiest way to contact, if you're local to the Asheville area, would be through social media of CrossFit AVL for aging, vitality, and longevity.
No joke. That's what that's for.
Yeah.
To find out like this? All I had to do was ask. The power of assumption, folks. I thought that stood for Asheville this whole time.
No, sir.
Well, Asheville may be a little bit upset, but they needed a rebranding.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And then if you're outside the Asheville area, my concepts are the Stay Active method. And so I'm on social media there as well.
Watch him, see what he can help you do for yourself. That's the most important difference that I found. And you'll find this common theme is these are people who equip and empower you to be able to be more aware and to have that awareness pay off in big ways, because now you're able to live a life where you're fully present, intuitively, dynamically, being able to respond in the moment. And that's what we need more of. We need more people who are present, who don't have to be distracted to feel good, and people who can be engaged in new ways in their life. All parts of it. So thanks for being here, and thanks for having this conversation.
Enjoyed this, Brian?
Yeah, beginning of very, very many to come. So
Good.
Looking forward to it. Thank you all for joining our conversations. We're developing this platform for simple, profound tools and techniques that can help you get the best out of your life, and more importantly, unlock potential. You can find me across all social platforms at The Brian Delaney, and online, come visit us at thebriandelaney.com.